Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Welcome here today for this morning's special session of council for the town of Greater Napanee, the 19th of December, 2022. Just to remind everyone that this meeting will be live streamed on the town's YouTube channel. So we'll get started. Call the meeting to order. Adoption of the agenda 2.1. We'll look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda of the special session of council dated the 19th of December 2022 to be adopted. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Norrie. All in favor? Opposed? Questions or concerns? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Moving on to number 4, items for discussion. We'll jump right into it. And I think Mr. Defoe will be speaking to it. So if you want to go ahead, Pete, we'll get started. And as we have questions, we can ask them, I guess, as we'll go in pieces and chunks, I guess is the best way.
Okay, thank you, Worship. If I could go to slide 3, please. 3, Worship. Maybe before I jump in, I'd just like to say thank you to a lot of the people that work behind the scenes to prepare this presentation that's in front of council this morning. Christy did the lion's share of the work, but it was a collaborative effort from the CAO through finance to many staff within infrastructure services. I'll jump right into the finish line. What is the staff recommendation? We're looking for a 2% rate increase. That is better reflects what you've seen typically in a 5-year average. It doesn't reflect today's inflationary costs, but it based on the economic times that we have that we're experiencing these days, staff believe that it's the best approach moving forward. The budget continues to be debt free. That will change with the upcoming wastewater plant, but our water and user rates are very competitive. So that's one good note to take into consideration as well. So with respect to the executive summary, there's some high level points in there. I will draw attention to the third budget down where it talks about our reserve balances being at an all-time high. That number is actually 11.7 million. There's a small error in that. Typically within the budget, you'll see that we typically are coming in slightly under on operating budgets. Revenue for utilities is a little harder to project. Things like weather, average day use, stuff like that can be a little bit more challenging to predict. So you will see some slight variances in that from year to year. Anybody that's watched Napanee's rates in the last 10 years, we used to have the highest user rates around. You'll see when we get to further into the presentation, you'll see that we're very competitive, and the approach has always been slightly to increase rates just slightly above what you're seeing for inflationary costs to try to slowly catch up on sustainability or asset management in a very slow and steady process. But a couple things that you'll see coming up in the future is not including in this budget here, but when we get to that point, staff will be coming in front of council with an RFP to release for a utilities master plan. So that's an overarching planning document that will align with the town's official plan. So they'll kind of run concurrently, and so that we can have the in-ground infrastructure to support growth. So. The last bullet on that slide was just with respect to the wastewater plant. I'll get into that on the last slide. So the wastewater treatment project, the top has a bit of a timeline that shows what the projected project looks like. But there are some hard deadlines. There's $14 million in funding from the federal government that shall be used by a certain date. So that's why you see the timelines in front of you. That does build in a slight buffer. Down on the bottom of that slide, you'll see there's 4 questions. Probably the number one question that council is going to get asked in the future is going to be directly towards who's going to contribute to this long-term debt. So, a common misconception in the public would be why being a user pay resident on the system for many years, why would I pay for a new plant? If it's growth related, why do I have to pay? So that gives council, a couple sentences in there that would be a good response for that. About 80% of the plant just is due to capital renewal, and it has nothing to do with growth. So that's an important one there. But, there's for those that have seen previous annual reports for the wastewater treatment plant, we exceeded 100% capacity 10, 11 years ago. Through a lot of in-house efforts, capital renewal programs, et cetera, we were able to reduce extraneous flows, and we were able to defer a project. Back in those days, we had zero money in reserves. We didn't have any federal or provincial funding at our fingertips, and it was beyond our means to do it. So we had to find other ways. That the work that was done for the extraneous flows is considered low-hanging fruit. So it's not something you can do, although it's an annual program that you can do all the time. You don't get the same yield. So you can't defer it indefinitely, I guess is what I'd like to say there. But you're going to see a lot of information coming forward very, very soon with respect to the wastewater plant. I'll just hit a couple of highlights in this slide and then move forward. You're going to see stuff as far as the first quarter of 2023 on what that first small phase looks like. And that one is the reason why that first phase is front end loaded is to allow the sale of 45 Commercial Court and dispose of that building sooner than later. So I think a lot of the bullets across for the timelines are fairly straightforward. So maybe I just turn, if there's any questions at this time, I can address them. If not, I'll turn the mic over to our director, Christy, for the balance of the presentation.
Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor Canal.
Thank you, Worship. Peter, just I did have a question posed to me from a resident that wanted to know that was stated on the slideshow of the 12.1 million was an all-time high, and now we have it down to 11.7 from clerical error. Is that 11.7 now still an all-time high?
Correct. So our reserve, through your worship, the reserve balances, particularly with impost reserves, have grown. They're over $3 million now. So we've seen that continually grow. Back in 2008, it was zero, but we've seen the other reserves grow as well. I'd have to go back and confirm with last year's number to see, to make sure it is definitely higher than that. But off the top of my head, I believe it is because it's an upward trend with most of them. So.
All right. So the question was, what are our plans for this, and why do we have, or why are we stating that we have an all-time high on reserves yet we want more of an increase? So I'm not the expert, you are, so I was just wondering if you could answer, why do we have these reserves, just for clarity, where they're going to be used, and why are we stating that we have an all-time high with wanting an increase? So if you could answer that for the public, I'd appreciate it.
All right, through your worship, that's a great question. The game changer in this is going to be the wastewater plant, right? So there's a little over $3 million in impost reserves that, in all likelihood, staff's going to come to council with financing options and strategies, several strategies for you to look at and consider. So what targeted impost reserve totals would be, that's something that council will definitely weigh on based on some recommendations from likely from finance and what the long-term future looks like. So until we get to the point, can we, I guess maybe I'll pull a slightly different question out of that. Can we go 0%? Ultimately is probably what the individual is asking.
Probably. Yeah.
So can we? Yes, we could. What does that mean? It's going to mean that we're going to have a greater reliance on existing reserves to balance this year's budget. And then it's going to hurt moving towards in a more sustainable manner in the future as well. To put it in perspective, this wastewater plants, we're in that $50-ish million range, right? So the 12 doesn't, we have $14 million in federal funding. But I'm confident that council's not going to deplete all of our reserves to try to get the debenture as low as possible. So it's something that we've been saving for a long period of time to try to make the financing strategies that are going to be presented to council a little bit more palatable is why it's there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think Mr. Dauber can confirm that 11.7 is the highest.
Well, it's higher. Peter made the statement he was just going to check last year to see if it was higher than last year. And I was just nodding to say, yeah, it is higher than last year.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Just for my peace of mind, where do you come across with a 400,000 clerical error from the 12.1 to 11.7? Like, where did, I don't know. I'm rather tight when it comes to money. So when there's a $400,000 differential between, oh, it was 12.1, but it's 11.7. So where was the mistake, or where was the money? Where did that $400,000 error come from?
Through your worship, so that error was not with our financial system. So we pull a lot of those records out, that data out into manual spreadsheets and work with graphs and stuff. The error wasn't there. So the financial side of it is good. There's no concerns there. It was just human error.
Just in the addition of what you're out of your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter, I'm just wondering, the cash reserve, where does it come from? Both portions of the capital? When a taxpayer gets a bill and there's a capital cost in there and there's a user pay fee for the actual usage of the water and the sewer. Where is the surplus coming? Is it coming from both or one, or?
Through your worship, so part of the reserves is impost, so that's paid by developers. So the user pay, all the users on the system don't contribute to that. So it's
They don't
only new
contribute to it
development.
at all?
So that's out of that 11.7, that's 3 point something change $1 million right there. The capital maintenance reserves, so there's been surpluses. This is a cumulative effect for many years. So there's a portion of that that's there. There's also a working reserve in there as well. So if there's been if our expenditures have been low and our revenue was high, there would be a slight bit of, based on the consumption side of the charges of the water bill as well, there's going to be a bit of surplus in that as well. So it's a combination of several things.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, well, I have just one. It's because it's been a little while since I've been on. You have 80% that's funded by user pay, funded through the user pay system, and 20% for the future development grants. All right, like through somebody that builds a new house and has an impost fee and all the other charges. May I ask, so therefore, when you say about a $50 million, for the wastewater that's going to go in, and you only have, let's say, 20 million or whatever, how much you're going to have, and you're going to have to take advantage for the rest. So how are you going to do these people that pay that are on the water and sewer bill? Do they get an extra charge rather than everybody in the whole municipality when you're talking to budget, or does that go throughout the whole municipality?
So through your worship, so all these types of things will be brought in front of council with a financing strategy, and I believe it's on that spreadsheet, or that timeline. It's around third quarter, I believe. Yes, third quarter of 2023 is when council can expect some more information on that. So I guess to go to your point is how, when you look at our reserve balances for impost only, if it's a 20% of the plan, it's going to be $10 million. And we only have a little over 3. I assume that's kind of more direct where your question's going.
You answered the question also. This is
Yeah.
going to come at a later date about
Yeah.
how you're going to finance it.
Yeah.
So I want to answer that at a later date, but when I see the 80% and the 20% split,
Yeah.
When somebody would read that, somebody who's not on water and sewer would automatically say, well, it's not going to affect me anyway, because it's going to be totally financed by the user pay system.
Yeah.
All right. But on the third quarter, when they're going to finance the rest of it, that's when you're going to see there's two things that are being said, the way I read it through, but maybe it isn't, but we'll find that out in the third quarter of how you're going to finance it.
Through your worship. So if you're not on the user pay system, you won't pay anything for the upgrades, period. So that would clarify for a lot of people in the community who are not connected to the system. Because we only have, say, roughly a third of the money in reserves, in the impost reserves, to fund the growth related portion of that. Part of those financing strategies that will be presented to council, we'll look at we'll have Michael Nolb's assistance with this for projected growth in the community. So we can look at what does the future DC charges of that, because that's been the imposts are no longer, and they're now incorporated into DC charges. So we'll look at projections with that to see whether or not if the projected DCs can fund the balance of the debenture portion that's growth related. So those types of things will be in front of council.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Any other questions? No. Okay, well, we'll continue on with Christie then. Thanks.
So as you heard, staff are recommending a 2% increase to both base and consumption charges and service fees within the rate schedule. This 2% increase amounts to $4.11 to the average customer, which is about the same as 2 coffees bi-monthly or $25 per year. Here, we just created a visual showing our average residential water consumption over the past several years. In 2022, our average consumption was 24.9 cubic meters bi-monthly, which is down from 26.4, which we saw the previous 2 years. So showing that our users are fairly consistent with their usage, but have slightly decreased their consumption. And I believe it was mentioned earlier, but the town has seen a significant drop in consumption since 2008, when the average bi-monthly usage was 40.5 cubic meters. So a few key notes about our average consumption. We currently have 3,501 customer service by the town, with 88% of those being residential customers. Our residential customers account for approximately 60% of our billed water revenue. And at 25 cubic meters bi-monthly, the fixed portion of a utility bill would be 52%, where the variable would be 48%. And as water consumption increases, the fixed percentage becomes much smaller. So our projected year-end expenditures for 2022 are expected to be approximately $103,000 under the approved 2022 budget. And these funds will be transferred to reserves. So you'll see at next year's presentation, hopefully our reserve balances will have grown a bit. Many line items are subject to fluctuating operational demands. So our year-end variances are common, and that's just due to the unpredictability of the system. Sometimes there's emergency repairs required in the system, and we account for that in the budget. The proposed 2023 operating budget increased by $132,000, and this is to reflect projected operational needs and mainly to account for inflation we're seeing on things like chemicals and fuel. So here we've included some key notes regarding these operating expenditures. One of the main increases, like I just mentioned, we're seeing for 2023 are fuel costs, line 30, and treatment chemicals, line 31. We have budgeted to upgrade our heating system at the Sandhurst Shores Water Treatment Plant. I believe that's line 51. And we're just changing that from electric to propane. And the switch over will result in a reduction in electrical costs, obviously after the change has been made. So we've been able to include that in the operating budget for next year. We saw savings in projected year-end values for 2022 on things like building maintenance. We had a reduction in required lab equipment purchases, and as mentioned earlier, fewer emergency repairs in our water distribution and wastewater collection systems. We were over by approximately 9,000 for emergency repairs to our fire hydrants within the distribution system. I think that was line 59. We did have a few that were struck by vehicles. That's kind of something that, you know, we do try to carry some in that line, but we've increased that based on average for 2023. We required some extra parts to make those repairs.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
If somebody hits a hydrant, who pays for it? Is it the person's vehicle, or is this a hit and run? Or all I'm saying is $9,000 in the grand scheme of things, I can understand why you would budget, but is there a cost recovery on hydrants? Is there any damages done?
Insurance companies.
We can get cost recovery on that through the insurance companies if we are aware of where it came from or what happened.
And may I ask, when you go into the new administration building, 99 Advance, you've got $30,000 for, may I ask why you need $30,000? Is that just communications or tech stuff?
That's mainly to maintain the infrastructure services office at 45 Commercial Court. So just so everyone's aware, historically, we weren't the sole occupant of that building. So a portion of building and planning paid for that, a portion of Public Works paid for that, the expenses for that building. So because we're going to maintain that building until the new maintenance building is put together at the wastewater treatment plant, utilities is taking the full costs. And we have accounted for some reductions. We should hopefully see reductions in certain things, likely heat. We could reduce the heat and that sort of thing there. So, but the main share of that is just utilities taking the full expenses of that building for the next year.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, the Deputy Mayor Calvert.
So you're talking about the new building you want to build down there. So you're gonna have offices in there, so the utilities are gonna be moving out of 99 and going down to the new building?
That's correct. So our maintenance shop will be down at the wastewater treatment plant.
I understand the maintenance shop of those. So all your offices are gonna be moving down to the new maintenance plant?
The majority of our offices have moved to, the administrative staff have moved to 99. There are a few electrical maintenance staff, our water meter technician and that sort of thing will move down to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay,
yes.
so your staff that are at Advance Avenue now are gonna be staying then?
That's
okay.
correct.
That's
Yep.
what I was trying to figure out why if everybody's moving back out again, why'd we buy it in the first place?
No.
Okay, one other question I had, you talked about the upgrades to the heating down at Sandhurst Shores. And you mentioned propane. Is there any reason why we couldn't use natural gas down there? Or is it just too expensive to achieve it there? We've got natural gas running down to both the hydro plants, so it's there. I just don't know whether there's enough volume to feed or whatever, so.
I'm not sure if that's been looked into. I'm sure it will be before we
Okay.
make the switch, but the initial thought was propane. But
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Councilman.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about this $30,000 too. So staff is going to remain at 99. So that's going to be an ongoing cost. Is that an increase in cost from what we've been operating at, where they've been?
Sorry, just to clarify, there would be no increase in costs as staff, to my understanding, as staff move to 99 Advance. It's because we have to maintain our building at 45 Commercial Court
I understand that.
until the new wastewater treatment plant,
I understand that.
the maintenance building. So because historically that building at the infrastructure services office at 45 Commercial Court, because we had building and planning staff in there, we had public works staff in there and utilities staff, we were able to, utilities didn't pay 100% of the expenses at that building. But because they've all moved out of there and just a couple of our maintenance staff are there, utilities has to maintain 100% of the expenses until the maintenance garage is put together. And then we'll move forward with the sale of 45 Commercial Court.
Great, just one more
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, Bill.
There's 4 entities in that building at 99, not just Napanee. So
You want me to take this one?
are we paying all of the cost of the utilities in there?
I
Or a
think,
portion of, or?
yeah, I think Mr. Dauber was going to weigh in on that. He may be able to provide some clarity there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, they are. We have basically an allotment for square footage. So the 3 entities that are leasing from us are paying a portion of the insurance, any sort of cleaning costs, utilities, hydro. They are paying based on the percentage of square feet that they're occupying. The confusion here is that a bunch of people are moving out from 45 Commercial Court to Advance. So they'll, as they go over, they will pay their portion from the utilities budget of the utilities, the insurance, the cleaning costs and all of that. In the meantime, on a temporary basis, we're still having to maintain 45 Commercial Court. So now you've got for a temporary basis, you've got two lots that's paying out.
So
But
that's where the increase,
that's where the increase, it's a temporary increase. It'll be there for this year. It should be gone by 2024.
be gone by 2024.
Well, you
So
think if you own two houses, you'd have to have two sets of costs. So in this case, it's two
understand.
locations.
And I'm guessing that could be reflected because it's the other groups aren't paying, it could be reflected somewhere else.
Exactly. It does amplify the situation because of the fact that there had been road staffs, that there had been development services staff at 45 Commercial Court, and they're no longer there. So utilities is picking up the tab for the whole portion. We shouldn't see as much electricity and heating costs because of the fact that it's only going to be a portion of the staff. So staff are cognizant of that.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm just, are we on salaries and benefits that we can discuss?
I think that's coming up next. Are we not?
Yep, I haven't spoke to the slide yet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we'll let Christie go and then.
Sorry.
Yep, no, I'll know to look that way, Mike. So thanks. Okay, go ahead, Christie.
So looking at our 2023 salaries and benefits related to the utilities department, there is a $275,000 increase over the 2022 budget. Grid adjustments due to our operator licensing increasing, upgrades, and cost of living adjustments accounted for 75,000 of that. There was a $35,000 impact as some of our roles within the department have been redistributed. And adjustments to shared services had a $40,000 increase. So this is a result of a reassignment of how salaries are being funded through between the tax base and the utilities to better reflect our current workflow. And accompanying these increases are an increase in benefits for all of this, which was just under $50,000. We are also expecting a $75,000 increase in the cost of benefits from our providers in 2023. Our projected year end for 2022 was approximately $94,000 under budget due to staff time reallocations. The majority of that was the salary for the provision of on-site sewage systems, which was a new service, I believe, last year, and a new staff member, but that was later transferred from the utilities department to the development services department based on legislated requirements and the overall success of the program. So development services also receives the offsetting revenue from that.
Okay. Did you want to go ahead, Mike?
I know working for the government, there's a good OMERS package, and great benefits, but you're almost like $150,000 through your grid. It was that the grid that was passed at the last council just near the end was $150,000. That was the impact on PUC. Well, no, I'm sorry. And because I see through OMERS, which I assume, because this is what benefits, that's, you know what I mean? It says increased benefit costs. There's a line item just at the very end of 75,000. But if your salary went up 150,000 and your benefits at 125,000, you're way more than a third. What is your total expenditures? What are your benefits compared to what your salaries are? Because it's that.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
through you, we account for about 33%. So when you sell for every dollar of salary, it's about 33%, 33 cents for benefits. The $150,000, as far as you're talking about the changes to the salary grids, that's the $75,000, of which 33% is $24,750. So the two together are what the change is according to the salary grid. We, as we are restructuring, as we're looking and doing a lot of analysis right across the board on how workloads, but also how financial impacts are being distributed, we notice that a lot of senior staff are doing work for the water department and the ratepayer is paying those salaries. So therefore, we did a redistribution to the tune of $40,000, moving it from the rate side over to the water side. Accompanying that would be the 33%, which would be the $13,200. So that's not new. That's just moving it from the rate side to the water side. And then there's a redistribution of job duties within the water department to accommodate a lot of the uptick in duties that are really tied to some of the bigger projects, especially the wastewater treatment plant coming up. That was an adjustment of $35,000. The accompanying 33% would be the $11,550. In 2021, we have been budgeting 30% for benefits. And what we're going to find is that it actually came out to 31.5%. So therefore, we're bringing it up to the point where we're accommodating for the increase that should have been in 2021, and then making sure that we're accommodating for those increases that have been given to us from our benefit suppliers. So we've projected it out to 33%. Keep in mind that this is a large increase for salaries, is still contained within a 2% increase to the overall budget. So the overall budget is going up far less than CPI, about 1/4 of what CPI is. And the salary is contained within that 2% increase.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Paul, I don't take this to offense. It's just the way I do it. It's just, I just don't want to see you're stealing from Peter to feed Paul. And when I see it at the bottom, like increase the total benefits of a line item of 75.5. And what is the senior staff doing, all right, in helping the public utilities out when public utilities already has the staff to do it? So when you're putting more onto theirs because they have maybe a better outcome, are you stealing from here to make this side look better because this side here has got some room to go to play with? You know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah.
It's just because when I see the total benefit impact, all right, because you're saying there's a shift here and in the grand scheme of thing, we're just below CPI, which I weigh at 2%, but are you taking the 75,500 or 125,000? You know what I mean? What you're saying from everything else to over here, is this what's happening? Are you, you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the
Alan.
changeover, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We've been paying Paul and using Peter for years, is really what it is. We're in a utilities budget meeting. Utility staff is here. Ratepayer staff is also here. We're also sitting down with them throughout the year, working out financial aspects. The CAO is sitting down in the meetings with and looking at part of the discussions on the wastewater treatment plant going forward. Human resources provides human resources staffing to the utilities portion. So the ratepayer has been paying for that portion of the work that these senior staff have been doing. As well, our GM of infrastructure in the past was spread out between a bunch of different areas, including recreation. That portfolio has moved over to corporate services. His attention is focused more to utilities. Therefore, there's a reflection of that. So this is a reconciliation of actual staff time spent on utilities that we're saying utilities should pay for. The ratepayers shouldn't be paying for that portion of their staff. It should be the ratepayers. So it's an adjustment to true up the actual work that's been done.
All right. I have one.
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
Sorry guys, but
No,
it's the first time of the cat, so I figured might as well get it all out. so I
You're
can
more than
understand it.
welcome to ask any question. you want.
Now, I know I cannot mention staff or anything or in the grid system, but in the public utilities system, there's been two positions that moved up recently. This reflects that in that because you have another individual that's going to be looking after the, the building of the new water treatment plant. His sole job will be going into that. And then the other two that moved up, all right, this grid system and this right here, the 150,000, that reflects what you've done there on the human resources side.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is reflective in there.
All right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on. Christy, you're going to continue then? Great.
So here are our recommended capital expenditures for 2023. The total is expected to be just over $7 million. The capital list includes full reconstruction of water and sewer on East Street from Dundas Street to the CN tracks, as well as pre-engineering for our a Plan 2024 in groundworks. Also included as capital expenditures is the previously deferred raw water reservoir liner replacement for our AL Dafo drinking water system. You may recall that this project has been carried forward for the past few years, but staff have found an economical yet dependable solution for this necessary repair. And in effort to ensure redundancy of our raw water supply beyond that reservoir, staff have included the replacement of one of 2 raw water pumps that bring our water from the Lake Ontario pumping station. It provides raw water over 16 kilometers from the lake to our raw water reservoir at the top of the golf course hill. This list also includes a data historian upgrades for Sandhurst Shores drinking water system, valve exercising equipment, the purchase of 200 water meters for replacement throughout our replacement program, new gas detectors for operation staff, a replacement truck mounted plow, and the wastewater treatment project engineering and design, and the construction of that new maintenance building that we spoke about a few times for the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, the question, go ahead, Councilor Canal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Christie, with this wastewater, the liner, for over the last 5 years, we've been carrying a number for this, and yet the project hasn't been done. So I assume that over the last 5 years, those monies that we budgeted for were either used for other expenditures or were put into a reserve. And now we're asking for 280,000. And when is this project going to be done?
So we've completed, yes, you're correct. At the year end, any overages at the year end would be transferred into capital maintenance reserves. And as far as the project, we were given some pricing that we weren't really happy with, mainly the warranty period. And in addition to the pricing. So staff have found a new supplier that provides a better warranty and a better cost. So we've already done some of the pre-engineering work, and basically once this budget is passed, we were comfortable to say go and have it manufactured, and we will get that installed this year.
Okay, so I guess it's just that, you know, we've been budgeting and the rate, the payers of the people in the water system have been paying for this and hasn't been done. And now we're asking for some more money finally. I just think that thing should have been almost paid for by now if it was just allotted into instead of put into reserves, if it was just put into a line item, right? So that was a concern that I have of that. But I guess answer my question, you were saying that if this is passed, then you're gonna order it, get it on the go, it'll be done
That's correct.
probably this fiscal year, I hope.
Yes.
Or
Next
20 yes,
fiscal-
thank you,
yes.
yes, you know, yeah, for that budget fiscal. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Mr. Dauber wants to weigh in as well. So go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The answer to the question is that right now, and we've switched to a system where instead of it being mixed up between current years rates being used for capital projects, we switched over to everything being used from reserves. All revenues over expenses are transferred into reserves. All capital projects are budgeted to come out of reserves. So in that case, we just haven't pulled it out of reserves. So we're not asking for another 280,000. We're just going to use the 280,000 that had been slated, that's been sitting there in reserves untouched.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Now, any other questions for Christie before she continues?
It just,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
sorry. But we're not using our reserve account as just like a general account, right? We're not using it just not an account, don't get me wrong, but if you put all your money in reserves and then we just use the reserve account to pay this and that out, it's very hard to track it from what I understand. From an auditor point of view, to see where the actually money is gone. That's not the case in this, is it?
Through
Okay,
Mr.
yeah,
Mayor,
go
no, in this case, what we're doing is we're following, sorry, if you don't mind, I'll just
No,
kind of wrap
let's-
a little
yeah,
more context
yeah.
around it. So back when the province kind of stepped in after Walker did and did the Clean Water Act, they required that we do water rate studies in order to project out what do we need in our rates to account for all operating costs and all capital costs. And every 6 years, we have to provide a new financial report to the ministry to say, we are collecting the rates to provide for all of our operating, all of our capital over the next 6 years. So the last one included the wastewater treatment plant. So when we, at the end of the year, any of the revenues over expenses are transferred over into reserves. And so at the end of the year, when the auditors come in, it's zero for the water and the sewer. Therefore, we then use those reserves that match our financial, not our financial statement, sorry, our financial plan that we send up to the province, and we use those funds from the reserves. So they're totally isolated and moved over here so that they don't get touched for other things.
Sorry, I understand that. May I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Pete, for years, quote me if I'm wrong, I'm very likely wrong, it's called age, but on top of the golf course hill, that bladder system and everything else was such disrepair. There was no way, go ahead and fix it. This would happen years ago from what I understand. So we went ahead and you said, quote me if I'm wrong here, you went ahead and said, well, we're going to put up a new, the blue silo, looks like a harvester silo, all right, to hold the water. That was the most efficient way. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? Is saying we're not using that anymore because it was in such disrepair. We put all our money into that to have a new hold up by the town barns, that blue silo there to hold the water. So we're going to discontinue using this. But I still see why now the change, why are we bringing this raw water holding tank there at the golf course again when it was in such disrepair? That's something I got to grasp.
Through your worship. So there's two different things at play here. So there's treated water storage. There was a deficiency in that. So that created, and that was the highest priority need.
Yep.
So that created the shifting gears to build that tank up on top of the hill.
Okay.
That tank's built, paid for. That was built in 2011. The raw water storage need is still there. So it just wasn't the number one priority. And just to put it in perspective, so when that liner is replaced, right now there's a single line that runs almost 16 kilometers from the lake. So when you're looking at risk and probability, that's a bit of a weak point right there. So you can overcome you can mitigate some of that risk by having additional storage. So once that new flexible membrane is replaced, it gives us more storage, more time to react to emergencies.
Okay.
Yep, great. Thanks. Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? Continue on then, Christy. Thank you.
So here we're just showing our capital debenture history for the past 5 years and looking forward into 2023, we will have zero debt. And this chart will obviously change as the wastewater treatment plant project develops further. Here we're showing where the projected 2023 revenue will come from. A large portion of our revenue comes from our water and sewer charges, both residential and commercial. Capital surcharges and in 2023 federal funding also accounts for a significant portion of our projected revenue. It is worth noting that the chart changes significantly from year to year. For example, in 2024, when we expect to see an even greater amount of federal funding, the pie will change drastically. And I should note that the various costs recovered portion, which amounts for just over $22,000 in revenue, it includes things like hydro fees recovered, sanitary sewer camera inspections, account terminations, and recoveries. And some key notes on that revenue side. We decreased the projected revenue for 2023 residential consumption. So these are water and sewer charges for residential properties. And we reduced that based on the 2022 average bi-monthly usage, which was down 24.9, down to 24.9 cubes from the 26.4 that we saw in the previous few years. This proposed budget and the last few years, we began combining the maintenance and capital surcharges into one line item. This isn't reflective on water billing yet, but will be in the future, and the users will see one surcharge at 66% rather than those two separate 33% surcharges. We had no claims submitted for federal or provincial funding in 2022, but we project to receive $2.4 million for the wastewater treatment plant project in 2023 and $527,000 for improving our wastewater and stormwater discharges in early 2023 as well. So we've included that there. And a few other facts that I just thought were worth highlighting. We had 47 new customers to date in 2022. 33 of those were residential customers. There have been 10,764 loads of water from the medium fill station. And I say to date, but that was back in November when we put this together in 2022. So we're getting lots of usage there. And our small fill station had given an equivalent of 1.5 million water bottles to date this year as well. So this is just a quick snapshot of our historical rate increases. Our department has an average rate increase of just under 2% over the last 5 years. You can see we've dropped significantly since 2013.
Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Our impost fees and our capital surcharges, are they comparable to any of the other areas of development in the other municipalities surrounding us? Or this is still, are they just going up 2% also, or are they remaining the same?
So our impost fees were included in the development charge review earlier this year. So we're not setting those rate increases anymore. I believe council passed those already. And I do think they went up to compare with other municipalities. Pete might have more to.
Through your worships, they went up considerably as part of that DC rate review, but they're still competitive. We're in the middle of the pack.
So we're in the middle of the pack for the impost fees and capital surcharges. May I ask what an impost fee would be for a residential house, in Napanee, if you would go ahead?
Through your worship, it's double digits now. I think it's up around 12,000.
So $12,000 just to have the opportunity to hook up to water.
Yeah. Yeah, and through your worship, the primary increase, the justification for that was the wastewater plant. So,
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Krista.
So this is just general information to give you an idea of what a 2% increase could mean to revenue. Should be noted that this is not linear, as not every line item has the 2% increase. And some revenue lines within the budget are flatlined, others are adjusted manually based on historical data. Here we show the financial impact to the average customer. As mentioned earlier, we're looking at $4.11 bi-monthly or 1 cup of coffee per month. Again, that's based on average usage. So if you are a higher water user, you're going to see a bit more of an impact there. Our proposed 2023 budget is just over $11 million, with $2.4 million of that being subsidized from funding at the federal level and just under $1.5 million being funded from our capital reserves. In 2021 and 2022, the light blue line indicates grant funding only, not from our reserves. So looking back at previous years, you will see that it is not that it is common to utilize those reserves as needed to help fund the budget. But I just wanted to make it clear that the blue line is not always funding from reserves. It does include grant funding as well. The current rate schedule provides one lower unit rate for commercial and industrial consumption at usage greater than 1,000 cubic meters. But this does not apply to our residential users. The declining block rate structure is 15 plus years in transition with zero negative feedback from local industry to date. We do closely monitor consumption from our large user groups and take that into consideration when setting these rates. But in theory, by 2027, both residential and commercial users will pay the same rate per cubic meter.
Is that common
go ahead,
throughout? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is that common throughout to all, because Napanee needs more industry for it to grow. We're not growing or dying, but I mean, is this an incentive? Like if somebody wants to like build an abattoir, you're gonna be going through lots amount of water for cleaning. Is there any, like, when you're gonna establish a business here or an industry here, you're gonna go ahead and say, wow, this is what my water bill is going to be. Is this comparable to other municipalities, or is this an incentive for us to go ahead and say, well, maybe we should keep the block system there to, you know, maybe to entice an industrial area here rather than Kingston or Belleville? You know what I mean? They're all, anybody who's going to come in here and is going to go ahead and hire, he's going to be looking at, you're going to have a ton of bean counters. They're going to be looking at all these things to compare apples with apples. So what I'm saying is you know what I mean? I don't want to be hurting the industries that are currently here. All right. I know it might be a small factor in their total budget, but at the same time, be, you know, inducive to have an industry to come here and say, we can offer this, this, and this.
I think the main thing here is that the Ministry of Environment doesn't, I don't want to say they don't support the declining block, or the current rate structure. It doesn't promote water conservation. So we're trying to tighten that block or ultimately eliminate it to encourage these industries to find ways to reduce their consumption. And
Are we the only municipality doing this?
We do that. Through your worship. So as far as what others do, some municipalities have inclining blocks. So the more you use, the more you're paying. So that's looked on more favorably by the ministry. With respect to the declining blocks, that can hurt funding applications to the province and the federal government as well, right? Because we're not doing everything within our power to promote water conservation and to delay premature upgrades of large scale capital upgrades of treatment facilities. So it's pretty typical, or where we sit is very typical, and a lot are trying to squeeze that declining block out and get rid of it. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Peter. Any other questions? Who's up next? Christy still?
so me. So looking at this graph, if the customer is using 0 to 1,000 cubic meters, regardless if you're a residential or commercial customer, you are paying that same rate. And once you're over the 1,000 cubic meters, the commercial and industrial users will pay more, and bulk rates are higher. And this is simply just due to the increased demand that those connecting to the system and taking those loads put onto our system. Our proposed 2022 rate schedule includes a 2% increase to most line items, with an additional 2% increase to the consumption charges over the 1,000 cubes that we just mentioned as part of that declining block structure. And I don't think we need to open it up unless anyone had any questions, but there is a link to the proposed rate schedule there. And we have also included a formula to help calculate your water bill. It's a helpful tool to our residents if they're looking to reduce their bill. You can play around with that to kind of see how much they would need to adjust their water usage. And it is based on the proposed 2023 rates and the average consumption at 24.9 cubic meters bi-monthly. So it's showing, we don't need to open it up either, but it's showing that at that 24.9 cubes bi-monthly, the average water and sewer bill would be around $209 and change. And step 5 in that formula includes only one calculation that I mentioned earlier at 66% for the capital reserve fund. As you'll recall, our current billing does have the two steps at 33%, but we've combined it in one. Looking forward to the future. The 2022 rate comparison included 7 other local municipalities, 4 of those having higher rates than us, based on, again, that bi-monthly average bill. We used to have the highest rates on this graph not that long ago. It's important to note that there are many variables when comparing municipal water and sewer rates. They aren't really all apples to apples. Treatment technologies, service levels, and economies to scale play a major factor in setting those rates. The town's current fixed and variable rate portions within our rate structure allow us the security to help address fixed costs while providing some flexibility to our residents for water conservation and cost savings.
Through your worship, if I could just follow up on one statement I made earlier to Councillor Shank. So there's another factor to consider when you're looking at inclining, declining blocks, rate structures. The fixed and variable portions of our rates are very, they don't accurately reflect what our fixed costs are, but it works, and it does provide the consumer with the flexibility. If they can conserve water, they'll save money. There's a lot of municipalities out there that the fixed portion of their rates is very high, and some are not even 100%. So there's no incentive to save. You get into premature capital upgrades. So there's kind of 2 things to look at when you're looking at that block structure: is the fixed and variable portion as well. And we sit in a very good spot on that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Go ahead, Councillor.
I understand that, Peter, but thank you very much. See the rebuttal to that, because over the years, I remember we went through the savings of what we could do years ago, of what we could do to save, with the amount of water usage, because of going, and you guys have really tightened it up and done an excellent job that way. And then on the other side, when it comes to budget, because so many people used less water, we had to raise the rates to cover the cost. So they're going, I don't know how, and I have my own well and water and have to look after my own. I wish I wasn't on town water, but a lot of residents in town went ahead and said, well, thanks a lot, Mike. We saved a lot, but now I'm going to pay more because not as everybody's saving. So that's what they said, but I understand, we don't want to go through Walker and everything else. And we've always had an excellent, the way you guys have run it. We've never had any problems in the past, but we just want to get up to speed of what we can. So in case you get asked a question that you understand what they're doing.
No, that's, I think it's a good comment. Thanks, Mike. Else? Go ahead, Chris.
So in total, there is 6.8 million in our capital and maintenance reserves. These balances are based on previous year's auditors' reports, and they're typically completed 6 months after year end. So again, they could theoretically be a bit higher once that analysis is done. So the capital portion is just over 1.4 million, the maintenance 5.3 for the total of 6.8 million. The graph on the right shows our impost and working reserves. We currently have almost 3.2 million, as Pete mentioned earlier, in our impost reserves, and those balances will just continue to grow based on development. These funds are to be used for growth-related infrastructure needs, and we anticipate we will draw from these reserves at some point during the wastewater treatment plant project. And it's important to note that the impost reserve, as I think we discussed earlier, but is funded solely from development and not individual water and sewer customers. The current balance of the working reserve is 1.6 million, and this reserve could be compared to a personal savings account. It will hold, or we will hold these funds for a major operational need in the future. And lastly, here is just a summary of the 2022 budget, the 2022 projected year end, and the proposed 2023 budget. The proposed 2023 budget is increased by just over 4 million when compared to the previous year's budget. But with the 2% increase to our user rates, this growth will be offset by an increase in projected revenue and funding totaling $2.1 million. And the remaining 1.4 million can be funded from our capital and maintenance reserves while maintaining manageable balances for future budgets.
Any questions or comments with respect to the summary there? Seeing none? Okay, we'll move on.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead, Counselor Shank.
Now, to try to entice industry, do we have, what is our water, do we currently have water flow going to our industrial park? Like, is our water fill, let's say a large company wants to move in there, do we have enough infrastructure on board to handle? Like, let's say a plant wants to come in, wants to go beside Goodyear or right in the corner there, 41, you know what I mean? Do we have the infrastructure in there to sell that piece of property?
Through your worship, so there's a couple things. It depends on the size of the development, whether they're internally either a high water and wastewater user or what their fire protection needs are. So if the fire protection needs are high or they're a high water user, we're looking at substantial upgrades out there. And when I say substantial, I'm talking, if we're looking at the industrial park out there, we're talking millions. We're talking elevated water storage, which is 7 to 10 million. And you have to put the infrastructure in the ground. You're going to put a large storage water management pond in there. There's going to be more information coming on this from Michael Nobes in the future.
Can you tell me what can we sufficiently sell up there for industry right now? Like, what, we're all here trying to, to promote industry or anything else like that. So what industry should we be looking at that would, we all have to work to get more industry here. So therefore, what can we go ahead and go after to not having, something that's low usage, low, I imagine economic development's looking at that, but I'm just trying to think of what ballpark would you say? Like, it wouldn't be.
It's through your worship. So a lot of it's building construction as well. So depending on what they build the actual structures out of, so if they can keep the fire demand low and they're a very low water user, that's the best case scenario for the town from a utilities perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
Might I suggest, your worship, to Councillor Shank, this is something that will be coming to council at a later date in terms of what we're doing with that, in terms of lot fabric, in terms of when companies come in, how do they contribute to the further development of the infrastructure? So we've turned our attention to that this last year and more attention in the future in terms of how we actually build that out. And how much do you do ahead of time for industry, or how does industry pay for it as they come? And that's sort of the balance that we make through that, but there will be something coming in very near future with regards to the industrial park.
Very good.
Great, thank you. I guess if we don't have any other questions with respect to there's another attachment, the utilities budget summary. I see there's a lot of numbers and spreadsheets there. So I guess if we don't have any, do we have any other questions with respect to that, or do we need to see that? I think we pretty much covered everything, but yeah, go ahead.
Just to add, the summary was just included as the presentation referenced a lot of those lines. So we don't need to
Perfect.
speak to that directly unless there are questions for sure.
Yeah, perfect. I think we've covered it probably fairly well, I think, with the presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Dauber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I would just add on to that at the end, I know we had a bit of a discussion to do with reserves. And I just want to make sure clarification, not only for utilities, but tomorrow night we'll be talking about on the tax side, and so I have a summary of that. Two components to any budget is the operating budget. How much does it cost us to run business on a day-to-day basis? And then what's our CapEx expenses? What are we doing to put money aside for those expenses coming down the road? And in this case, I think it's really highlighted the fact that we're required by legislation to make sure that we're covered for those capital costs. As we're coming up to a capital project, it's fairly normal to see those reserves grow in anticipation of that. And then we'll see that drop and then build up as we go and as we start paying that debenture off. We don't use reserves on a day-to-day basis. Anything that happens in reserves comes to council. For the most part, is through the capital budget. That's kind of the biggest chunk. Sometimes things happen in through the year, an emergency situation with a roof or a furnace breaks down or something happens. And through our procurement bylaw, we have a certain amount of dollar value that we're able, the CAO, myself, are able to sign off on, but then we always come back to council with a report to let council know. So those reserves, whether it's tax-based or whether it's utilities-based, we always come back to council and give information and seek a resolution. Even if it's an emergency expense, we'll seek a resolution that council approve, even though it's already been done, what staff's already done, but we will always be communicating. So there are not ins and outs with the reserves that council will not be pre-warned or will not be informed of. So I just wanted to make sure that that was communicated very clearly and specifically to council.
Thank you, John. I saw you walk over earlier. I figured.
Oh, and I just want to make sure, because the nature of the conversation was sliding towards, well, I've seen this before and where did it go?
Yeah.
There are things that, even if it wasn't by legislation, it's good practice to say you're putting money aside. If something comes out of reserves, you want to make sure the council understands that, right? So clarity is a good thing.
Absolutely. Is there anything else? Seeing nothing, we'll be looking for a resolution. We have a staff recommendation that the council receive and approve the proposed 2023 Greater Napanee Utilities operating and capital budgets as presented. That the council direct that a bylaw to adopt the 2023 Greater Napanee Utilities operating and capital budgets and water and sewer service charges at the rate presented come forward to the January 10th, 2023 council meeting for approval following prior required public notice being completed. I will be looking for a motion. Councillor Norrie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. Any comments or questions that we haven't covered yet?
I asked for recorded vote,
Yes, we can have a recorded vote.
just so everybody, I've seen it in the past, they know. Yeah. So
Great.
Absolutely. Let me just pull up my screen for that.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
All right, so for the recorded vote, we will start with Counselor Ward 1, Counselor
Yes.
Shank. Great. Counselor Ward 2, Counselor Hicks.
Yes.
Counselor Ward 3, Counselor Pennell.
Yes.
Ward 4, Counselor Norrie.
excuse me, yes.
Ward 5, Counselor Martin.
Word 5, yes.
Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yes.
And your worship.
Is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is carried. We'll be looking for a motion to confirm proceedings. Bylaw to confirm proceedings, the Council of the Corporation of Town of Greater Napanee at its special session held December 19th, 2022. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Pennell. Any comments or questions? I guess we better read the bylaw first. The bylaw 2022 being a bylaw confirmed proceedings of the council at the special session held December 19th, 2023 be read a first and second time and finally passed, and that the mayor and the clerk sign the same and affix thereto the seal of the corporation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we'll look for a motion for an adjournment of today's meeting. Councillor Shank. Deputy Mayor Calver, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to those that are watching on YouTube. Thank you. Bye-bye.